Afternoon, Cherries fans, and welcome to this latest show here on Up the Cherries in all departments. Before I welcome on my special guest, who you may recognise, here's a little bit about our sponsors, Dental on the Banks. To find out what they can do for you, visit dentalonthebanks.co.uk. Now, my special guest is a Coventry fan. He come on the show for our opposition preview back towards the end of last season. But he did make a video fairly recently about, is the Premier League competitive? It is a pleasure to discuss this subject with Gareth Withers. Afternoon again, Gareth. How are you doing?
I'm all good. Season's finished. Got to find things to do now, haven't we? But you've done what I thought you might do. You've gone back up.
Well, we're absolutely delighted about it, and we're really looking forward to the Premier League in a weird way, because the big question is it competitive? And my answer is no, because we're at the moment thinking 17th is an achievement. And we shouldn't be thinking that way. Of course, you did a video recently, Gareth. Do tell us a little bit behind why you did that video, and what it really highlights.
I think being a Coventry City fan, which is where I come from, obviously, and supporting them since the mid-'80s. I was there when, we were already in the first division for a while, of course, and then obviously the Premier League started. And I was there when it all began. I was only 14 at the time. And I remember, don't get me wrong, I remember being mega excited about the start of it. And it just brought a newfound kind of energy to football. And of course, we were there on the original photo shoot. And I thought, I just wanted to see, because obviously we've had a massive roller coaster since then, as a lot of teams have, if it was just one of those things that there's teams that stay up there for a bit and then come back down, but there's always a fair share of teams that go up and down. But I wanted to just test it, so I thought it'd be a bit of geek time. I've got a bit of time on my hands at the moment, so I look back to 20 years before the Premier League, because obviously there was football before it, and just to see what the top 7 finishes were, and if it was kind of still always the same teams. But of course it wasn't, and what you noticed was there was a real variety of teams that were challenging all the time, even for the top 4 that were challenging all the time. Yes, you had 1 or 2 that stuck there, like Liverpool and the like. But generally speaking, everyone, the likes of Bournemouth, if it were, had their opportunity to get into the top 4. Cov were there initially in the Premier League. We were challenging Norwich for the first half of the season for the top 2 places. It's unthinkable, isn't it? And Norwich stayed there. They stayed in the top 3. But I just wanted to see if I could put that into a kind of video to show that actually through the years things are getting worse in terms of being able to compete up there. And of course, the proof is there. The evidence is there when you see it, that this kind of circle is closing in and everyone on the outside are just kind of playing, as you've just pointed out, to stay in the league rather than actually playing to try and win stuff.
I think there's a problem across the whole of football at the moment, because if you look at the previous Champions League winners as well, again, it's the same old teams. The Premier League, the top two seem pretty. Nobody can move them at the moment. Man City and Liverpool seem to battle it out between each other.
Yeah, and well, I think I heard that match of the day or something like that the other week. But yeah, it's going to be those two now for the foreseeable future, and you just think that's such a shame, isn't it? And then to see like Haaland sign for Man City, you just think, well, this is just making things worse. You're getting the best players on top of the players that you've already got. So you're right, they're kind of stretching away, and it does make things really difficult, because I suppose from a Premier League point of view, what do they do? Is there a way of stopping it? So obviously in my video, what I tried to find was ways you could kind of change this, but it is very difficult. I mean, one thing, and yourself, you'll know this, that's key for me to start it is just getting kids to support their local side, and not just don the Chelsea and the Man U and the Liverpool strips, because for a start, you're never going to get to see your team regularly. That's the whole point of football, is you get to go and watch the game, smell the grass, smell the pies, and and shout from the terraces. And they're never going to feel that. They're just going to see it as a televised sport, like a computer game. So getting them to support the local team. I mean, and you will have seen that with Bournemouth, of course, having gone up to the Premier League recently with our resurgence. When I go into schools now, I see kids wearing Cov kits, and it's so nice. I don't see the big six being worn or the big four. They're wearing Cov strips, and okay, the Cov strips have been good recently, which helps. But the resurgence has really brought it about, and you can see there's a real change in the city, and it's really helping. But I don't want that just to be Cov. If everyone can develop that mentality that there's more to football than just watching it on telly, it will start to. I mean, it's baby steps. It's nothing to do with the money, really. It will bring in revenue to the clubs. We're certainly getting a lot more money than we were in League Two when we had about 6,000 fans. But yeah, that's a start, I suppose.
There's also teams that have tried to get in there. So, for example, back in 2004, you had Leeds, who tried to push into that top four, tried to win the Champions League, failed. You can see a similar sort of situation happening at Everton, where they've spent a ridiculous amount of money, but on the spin side, finished just above the relegation zone last year. So there is perils of trying to break that mold, isn't there?
This is the thing, isn't it? I suppose it's like you say, it's deciding whether you want to make that push to try and fight the top teams in there. But you may regret that, as you say, because obviously, it did look like Everton were going to be strong. They signed a lot of big names, didn't they? They signed James and all sorts, and Alan's done well for them. But yeah, just a real kind of insane season where you just saw them completely drop off, and you're like, you've got to gamble, or you do what I think Eddie Howe did, didn't he? You're just really sensible with the signings you make. You make signings who are going to do well in the Premier League. Okay, they're not going to be Ronaldos and whatever, but they're going to keep you there. And I suppose that's the key, is to establish yourself and then try and move on from that. I mean, Leicester were one, weren't they? If you think about some of their big names, they were cheap. It wasn't Vardy about $1 million or something, and Kante wasn't. You know what I mean? So it can be done, but again, it's money talks in a way, isn't it? A lot of the time, and as you say, with Leeds, they kind of plummeted a bit. They're still on the periphery, aren't they? They were very close to going down this season, but it just seems unfair, doesn't it? You've got these teams at the top that are never ever coming down. I speak to people who are United fans, and they're devastated with this season. You think you finished 6th in the Premier League. Cov wouldn't be devastated with 6th in the Premier League, and they've got this mentality now that they have to be up there, or they've failed. And you think, no, I mean, when I saw United this season, I'm sure their fans would agree, they looked like a bottom half side. It was incredible that they finished 6th. It really was, and I think it was down to having Ronaldo to bang the goals in, when he did. But it's a shame that the football has got that massive cut-off now.
And you look at Newcastle, for example, and what they're potentially going to do. When I looked at the demographics, the 7th place spot, sometimes does change. You've had Burnley there, you've had Bolton there, but that could even become a close 7 eventually, with Newcastle spending the money they're getting.
I think it's very likely because you'll start to hear rumours of crazy people going to Newcastle, I imagine, because their fortune is insane. I mean, it's much bigger than any of the other clubs, isn't it? So, yeah, you wouldn't be surprised that they can start. They can lure people in. I mean, we've got that issue at the moment with our top three, as it were, Gyökeres, O'Hare and Hamer, where Cov don't need to sell, and that's good for us. That's the first time we've been in that position. But if a massive bid comes in for a player and they're going to get offered 4 or 5 times worth what they've got at the moment, they'll go. So, and this is where Newcastle will have a hold again, like you say, on other teams, and there's a very good chance it will become a top 6. And then does it just go off into something else? Is it going to happen that those teams do create a separate league and allow the top league in England to be competitive?
It would be a nightmare to have the Super League mentioned again. And that was something that was bought out of pure greed. But how is that even managed? Is that a case of if somebody was to finish bottom out of the English sides, they could be replaced by, say, for example, somebody like Brighton, somebody like West Ham who've had a good season? Or is it just that closed shop, which isn't what football's about?
No, and imagine being, you've got your glory supporters who can sit on a sofa and watch it, and they'd enjoy it all day, every day, I'm sure. But like you said about the Champions League, that's a closed shop, isn't it? I think if I did the same video with the Champions League, it would have the same scenario. You're going to have the same teams up there all the time. But it's such a dangerous line to go down, isn't it? Because for those fans who've supported those big clubs and have been to the games and like to watch them play against, your Evertons, Leeds, Covs, Bournemouths, it's a massive, massive difference. It's a massive change. And in fact, those fans would call, if their Man U went off to the Super League, they'd call for a separate Manchester club, wouldn't they, to be made that they could actually watch at home. But that's just insane. But you kind of think, can you see it going on any other way? I don't know. Because as we pointed out, it's really hard to see anyone touching the top of our league anymore. But I can't see any other way around it, really.
The great thing about the Championship is when you look at the sides that come up last season, Peterborough went straight back down. You had Hull that was always there and thereabouts. But Blackpool, for example, managed to get into the top 6 at one point. And is it a case, because there is both an up and a down from the Championship, that why it is so competitive, and because all that money is just being channeled into those top 4, the TV rights need to change themselves, don't they, as well?
They massively do. And of course, the good thing is, don't get me wrong, there is a lot of television in terms of the other leagues as well, which is good. It probably needs to go even further, doesn't it? But I recognise from a television perspective, the Premier League is where it's at. But you're right. Incredible season in the Championship, and why, in which it's worth doing another video, I think, to say, is the Championship League the best English league to be in? Because obviously, Bournemouth are pleased they're out of it, I'm sure. But the fact that, like you say, at the start of the season, I couldn't even predict what Cov would have done. Okay, we finished mid-table in the end, but to think we were in the top 4 for a while, and the likes of Huddersfield, I think a lot of people had them low down, didn't they? Had them as kind of all possible relegation fodder. They ended up in the playoffs. Luton Town, insane, got to the playoffs, and there was teams that dropped to the bottom that perhaps you didn't expect to. So it's an incredible league to be in, and there's no way I can even predict where it's going to go next season, because with the likes of Burnley, unfortunately, Burnley could be in trouble, and again, that's an issue, isn't it? That's horrible to say. So they could plummet, but of course you don't know, because obviously with a bit of parachute payments, they might be able to force their way up to the top. But Sheffield United didn't do as well as we thought initially. Okay, they got there in the end. It's been an incredible season, and the likes of Forest, to lose 7 out of 8 in the first 8 games, you kind of thought if that happened in the Premier League, you're probably done for. But in the Championship, you just never know. So I do feel good that we're still where we are, and I'm pleased we weren't down the bottom and looking to drop down to League One. That would have been horrid. But to feel we're back in the Championship, and I feel like the players we've got will be happy to fight again in that league. But what do you think with Bournemouth in terms of where you want the season to go?
To be honest, all I'm thinking about at the moment is 17th. And I'm thinking, and for me, the Premier League, the second season when we was in there previously was the best.
Yeah.
When we finished 9th, we made a real good go of it. It was just after Leicester had won the Premier League themselves. So, of course, there was that fairy tale story that everybody was working off the back of. In that last season, which of course was ravaged by COVID, we had VAR issues. It just wasn't a fun place to be. When football restarted, it was only going to go one way. And when we went back down into the Championship, it was nice to, be in games and have games to be competitive. Yeah, I know that we had such a strong side that come down from the Premier League, even with the sales of Callum Wilson and Nathan Ake. But at the same time, it was always good that somebody could beat anybody really in that league.
Yeah.
Whereas if we go to Manchester City next season, personally, I can only see it going one way, and that's nothing against our players. That's nothing against them. It's just a case that if, say, for example, Haaland's not playing on the pitch, and we're putting up a good fight, what do? Pep Guardiola just goes, "We'll stick him in." He scores a couple of goals, and
happened a few times this season, didn't it? Where he just thought, "Oh, I better get this person off the bench now." I was almost giving him a rest, but might as well give him a go. I think the key thing for you and why we all kind of battle in the Championship to try and get up there is you've got the big games to play now, haven't you? You've got some big games that you can get excited about. When that fixture list comes out soon, you can say, "Oh, look, this is when we're playing," and especially the home ones. The home ones are good for you against the Man U's and the Chelseas, and you will get those victories. And this is something that I think we all kind of love about if we finally get up to that league, is you get those moments. Some of my key memories as a Cov fan are when we beat those top 4 teams. So when we beat Liverpool 5-1 at home and Mickey Quinn scored, that was a while ago. And he got a hat-trick at Highbury on the first day of the season when Huckabee scored against Man U. They are moments that stick in your head, and they're moments that stick in your head because you saw the people, the kind of glory supporters around in their Liverpool tops who lived in Cov. And to actually be able to rub their nose in it and say, we've beaten you. You will get that, and it will happen next season. You'll get some victories against some of the bigger clubs, which will give you such a buzz. And it would have done in that season you finished 9th. You would have had a few of those. And that is obviously the positive part of being up there. But it is a shame, isn't it, that we feel at the start of the season the one thing we need to do is try and stick it. 17th, and like Leeds being probably happy to finish where they did in the end. And but like I said, it's very hard to see how that's going to change. But what did you? Because you did very well in terms of your transfers as well, haven't you? Like you said, you've got Wilson,
we have
sold him off, and that has worked.
Yeah, and that was Eddie's tactic, was to bring in players, improve them, and then sell them off for a profit. The same happened with Nathan Ake, of course, Callum. Same happened with Arnaut Danjuma as well. So that was one of his tactics, and I think it worked. And also, it softened the blow of going back down to the Championship. Which Burnley, if you look at their squad, a lot of those are out of contract. They've also got a massive bill to pay, I believe, as well. If everything's correct in the press, they could be a very big sticking point. But there's other sides as well. If you look at it, Gareth, who have gone down from the Premier League. Of course, Coventry went into League 2 at one point, which is unthinkable for a club of Coventry's size. But you've also had teams throughout the years who have actually dropped even lower. Luton, of course, it was before the Premier League, but they dropped all the way to the National League.
Yeah.
You have Oldham, who were a founding member of the Premier League.
They're on that picture, yeah.
Yeah, and they are now going to be facing the National League next season. You've got all sorts of teams. Wimbledon don't even exist anymore.
Yeah.
because of something that was, well, very, very badly decided back in 2002. So there is perils for these sides, and that's the biggest nightmare of going into the Premier League. It's great to be there, but what if we get it wrong at the board level? What if Scott Parker gets it wrong and spends a lot of money? We go straight back down, but we just can't afford to sustain it.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? And it is that money side. I mean, it's funny you mentioned those teams. We played Notts County in the playoff semi-final in League Two, and thank God. I mean, that's down as one of my favourite nights ever because we beat them 4-1 and got to Wembley. But you just look at what's happened to them since, and you think that could easily have been us. That could easily have been us because we were, until Robbins came, we were in deep stum. We were falling, dropping like flies, and fans were disappearing, and there was just no feel good factor. We obviously ended up playing at Sixfields for a bit. We played at St Andrews for a bit, and you just sensed in that game that we were so pleased to win it, and you just felt we were then going to win at Wembley as well. But you saw Notts County, and they just plummeted, and it's so dangerous. And I think you're right. I think you've got the model right, and you had the model right with Eddie, and we've got it right with Robbins in the fact that you don't spend an absolute awful amount of money. You don't rely too heavily on loan players. A lot of people have. Tony Mowbray often does that. He relies on loan players and generally dips after Christmas, as he did this season. We've bought players that belong to us, so they belong to Cov City. For how much, it doesn't matter. The most we paid for was really Hamer. And you recoup it in the end, don't you? Because if those players are good enough, they'll be snapped up. And I think that is one way of doing it. But again, when it comes back to competing, it's so difficult. Sometimes it's a matter of luck, I suppose. Like with Vardy, it paid off with Leicester, and it just depends on momentum, doesn't it? If you can get the momentum, but then you kind of feel that would only be one season, maybe, like you did to get to ninth, and then you sink back down again. It's difficult because we love this game, and we don't want it to kind of die, and we don't want it to be completely taken over. But of course, financially, it has been. It's very difficult to know what the answer is. You can't have a draft system because it doesn't work in the same way NFL does, because NFL has a certain amount of clubs that it just works between, whereas we've got 92 and the National League and whatever, it just wouldn't work in that way. So it's very difficult to try and get a level playing field now.
And of course, the FA Cup, the Carabao Cup as well, they are also becoming quite close shops. So you have the stories. You do have the stories still in the FA Cup, but it's normally now teams, beating, say for example, Kidderminster beating Reading, Boreham Wood beating us. There's never those stories. I remember growing up as a kid, York City beating Manchester United one year, and it's an amazing story to actually hear. You don't have that because those sides are so strong.
And strong in terms of B teams as well. It's not even just they can put out their second string or third string, and their teams. I think Wrexham beat Man U or Arsenal, didn't they? I think years ago, 1-0. But it's I did a video because obviously I did a song for every Cov game, and my song for the Derby FA Cup game in the third round was that. It was it was linked to the game, but it was also linked to the fact that, again, the FA Cup is being taken away in the way that, and of course, I predicted that the final would be Man City Liverpool, and it was, you just knew then it would be, and of course, I kind of felt a bit of a fraud because then the third round was good. The third round, as you pointed out, was excellent. There was some, I think Newcastle went out, didn't they, to Cambridge?
They did, Cambridge, So
there was some good shocks. So I kind of thought, okay, maybe, but then you just knew in the end it would go the same way. So. Yeah, you're right. It's and the likes of Ronnie Radford, people like that would look at it and think, oh, it's such a shame, really, because it is such a jewel in the crown of English football, and hopefully will always be like the top league is, but it's kind of being sapped away from us now, and unless like billionaires come to every single club, and it starts getting stratospheric. You can't see how that's going to change now. So you kind of, again, I suppose in a similar way to the league, the success in the FA Cup is to beat a big club in the third round, but knowing you'll probably go out in the fourth or fifth. But that's your moment, like Cambridge. Yeah, it's a tricky. So, what was yours this season in the FA Cup?
Boreham Wood.
That was this season, yeah.
Yeah, we got beat by Boreham Wood. We could have been playing Everton. And yeah,
it's always worse when you know who you could play next.
Yeah, exactly. But I thought, well, if we get through to play Everton, we've got a chance of beating them. But although it was painful because it was us, in a way, it's still a little bit of a fairy tale story. Team from the National League, turning up to Dean Court and then beating us. Yeah. A team that, have recently been relegated from the Premier League with a lot of players that are still Premier League quality. Yeah. Nat Phillips was on the pitch, for example. Yeah, and it really does, it's a good story, even though a little bit painful for us at the time. But I don't think you find those, you don't see those exciting stories anymore, where a top team has been beaten by somebody from the National League. Or can you imagine Man City being drawn against Solihull Moors, for example, and then Solihull Moors winning at the Etihad?
Because as you said,
half a point, isn't it? Really,
if it was, because this is the problem, I suppose, from above, Man City would be looking down and looking at Pep, and if he's 1-0 down, there'd be a lot of pressure to make sure you win this game. And like you say, okay, I better bring on De Bruyne. Why not? And then within no time the game has changed, and there must be pressure. I get it from above. It's not like Man City can turn around and say, oh, "Let's just lose." They can't. I get that, and they've got to still try and fight to win every game. But yeah, you want both teams to be saying, "Let's fight to win the game," but have an equal opportunity of winning the game. And it's the same with the Premier League, as we're pointing out. You want everyone to start the league wanting to get up there. Okay, I'm not saying Fulham have to try and win the league, but at least wanting to get up there to compete at the top, because that did used to happen. As I pointed out in the video, in the 70s, 80s, teams were up there fighting for the title, and like teams like Ipswich, like Watford, finished in the top two. And, you look at it now and you think, well, kids would be thinking, who are they? And it's a shame because it's like, no, that's how it was, because everyone had their own opportunity to get up there. And you still had your big game. So it was great. You still got to play at Anfield, and you might not have won, but you were there and thereabouts. Yeah, it's a video I've wanted to make for a while, and like I say, I could do one on the Champions League. You could do one on the Championship to suggest that it's a much more competitive league. Again, you have the issue there with parachute payments. Maybe that could be looked at. I don't know. I suppose the worry is if you did take away the parachute payments, the teams dropping would lose their players, and that's harsh, because you've got, if you've got those players to keep and push you back up, that's good. Did you find when Bournemouth went down, did you lose a lot? Obviously, like you say, part of Eddie Howe's plan was to make the money back. We
lost the Callum Wilsons, the Nathan Ake's. Ryan Fraser went for free as well. He decided he didn't want to play during the COVID period. So we did lose two of our key players. But I think because of what Eddie had done, and was to actually develop those players through and then sell them off at profit, that actually balanced everything out. Rather than, if we couldn't sell Callum Wilson or Nathan Ake, for example, I think we would be struggling, because to pay those wages, struggling financially, we would have had to probably make more losses elsewhere. So sell probably players who wouldn't command that fee. Say, for example, Steve Cook in the first season, we might have had to let him go because of the amount of money that we were spending on two players, for example.
Yeah.
Josh King was another one who was on big money. So I think that was some really shrewd moves by Eddie. Of course, the landscape's changed a little bit since then with COVID as well. And I think that is, I'm not sure what Scott Parker's going to do. Is he going to go for dip into the loan market and pick up, say for example, Nat Phillips for another year. If we stay up, option to buy, that would make sense. Or is he going to go all out, spend 40 million, and if we go down, worry about it then? Because how much resale value will those players have if they have a poor season, for example?
Well, there's the key, isn't it? You can easily buy someone who looks like he'd be the part. I suppose like Maguire at United, isn't it? You could easily buy someone that you think is going to work, but it doesn't fit. And then, as you said, that's where the Everton carnage starts, isn't it? When things don't work out, and suddenly, as you say, the resale value. I think so. And is so important is to get it from the roots upwards, and again, that's something Robbins has instilled so well in Coventry City since he's been here, is from the kids upwards, the team plays the same way. It knows exactly how it plays. So he knows he can pick someone out from the academy, put them in the first team, and they'll click because they just know how to play Robbins ball, as we call it. And that's important in every club, to develop that, and not just to throw everything at big transfers and say, right, this is what, because that's kind of what happened with Everton, isn't it? Really, we were putting all money on names, and of course the problem you get that with United this season is there's no camaraderie, there's no kind of team bonding, there's no feel that they know exactly who's playing off what. They just kind of play their own game, and it doesn't work in that way. And I think that's something Scott Parker will want to instill, won't he? Is that everyone recognises how Bournemouth play, even from the youngsters coming up, so that he can kind of bring players in. And then it almost, you get less scared of the opponents you're playing. It's like when we went to Southampton in the Cup, we played such a brilliant brand of football for the first half. And we passed them off the park for a lot of the game because, again, the team has a unit and knows how to work. Ironically, they then brought on some of their best players. And we lost. But you just sense that if you play with no fear and you can do that from the ground upwards, it does help. And you have a unity together and everyone knows how the game is played. An ethos that works through the squad. But I think that's the problem. I think in the Premier League, as you've just pointed out, people are so panicky about, what they do to actually make any kind of go at it, that they throw money at it. And that's not always the way. But of course, for the big teams, that's how they succeed and how they're kind of going off away from the rest of us.
And look at the sides as well in the Championship that gambled and not got there, because the Championship is such a competitive league. Derby is the big one. And of course, what's happened to them. I think, the Premier League money should be shared along the ladder, really, along the food chain, all the way down to League Two and even the National League a little bit more fairly, because at the moment, how much did Liverpool actually gain from finishing second? How much did Man City gain from, winning the league? And of course, in Liverpool's case, you've got to factor in as well that they made the Champions League final, which of course then brings even more prize money that the likes of Bournemouth and Coventry couldn't even think of, dream of.
And again, I think this is, you're right, absolutely. The kind of money you get for winning, that needs to be sorted, because it is insane. And I think in terms of, you're right, distribute the wealth. But again, it's what I said at the start. It starts from us going to our games, going to our local games, actually not relying on our kids just supporting Chelsea and Man U from afar and buying all their kits and paying into giving them even more money. And that's the problem. Those teams have become so global that, merchandise and everything just gets, again, it just sends them further up. So it's trying to level the field as much as we can, getting our young generation to support our smaller sides, as it were. So go and see Notts County as opposed to, watching teams from afar. But that is hard, because I get that the Premier League has put it out there as this big, you must support all the big stars and no one else. But it does need to be evenly distributed, because they have enough money as it is, and they've got money pouring in all the time. But again, when it comes to the point where the likes of United, a lot of the time they're in debt, aren't they? They're relying on that money coming in. So where will that end up? Especially if they had another few poor seasons and they get kind of pulled down towards the bottom. I don't know. And the Newcastles and Man Cities and Chelsea's just disappear. But you're right. It needed to be flooded down many years ago, really. And I think the Premier League took far too much when it first came in. And like I say, don't get me wrong, I was only young at the time, and I know the whole pull of it was incredible. The fact that when I used to watch Cov on telly, it used to be maybe once a season on ITV, and it was always a big deal because you were like, "Oh, we're on telly! It's amazing!"
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you were on all the time, so that it was incredible. And the thing was, a lot of teams like us, we still went to the games. It wasn't like we just watched it on telly; we did keep going. But you kind of probably just saw what was going to happen because people from afar with lots of money suddenly thought, "Oh, hang on, we've got an option here to make even more."
See, this is another thing that, we need to resolve, and that is the TV side of things. So how many times a season are Man United on Sky Sports? And then you take a team like Peterborough, for example. How many times are they on Sky? I'm sure that, I could count it on one hand. Probably only about 2 times. This is the main problem because, say, for example, Dean Court, we've been hugely successful this season, but we've only got a limited stadium. And these young kids now coming through who want to watch their local side can't do it.
No,
and during the COVID period, there was where you could buy on AFCB TV, you could buy match passes.
Yeah.
And I thought that was brilliant because we couldn't go to the games anyway, so couldn't get to Dean Court even, though I wanted to. But at the same time, it meant that it was opening it up to a whole new generation, whereas these kids had just been like, right, okay, Bournemouth have got a ground over there, in the Championship, fantastic club support, but you can't get a ticket. It was opening it up to them. Whereas what a lot of these kids are probably doing is going to their remote, turning on Sky Sports and saying, "Oh, there's Man United again. Right, I'm going to go and buy a Man United shirt."
Yeah. And I tell you what it is as well. It's reliant on glory, isn't it? It's like that's why they're called glory supporters. But it's thinking, I need to support a team who will be winning, so I'm going to support one of those. And that's a shame because actually the whole point of supporting a Bournemouth and a Cov is the fact that we're going to have bad times, and that's what makes the good times even better. The buzz of winning in League Two was massive, and that's insane to say. We never wanted to drop that far down, but the buzz when we did was incredible because we'd had such a bad time. And to just support a side on telly from afar who are always going to be winning or always going to be near the top, to me seems pointless. And it would be nice, it would be interesting to hear from those kind of fans and see what they say, as to why that is exciting for them. And as you say, always on telly. And to be honest with you, there's been so many incredible games that Sky have missed from lower leagues that, because obviously everything goes to and the amount of times you do watch some Premier League games and it's just tedious sometimes because they nullify each other. Now, of course, don't get me wrong, you're going to get some of the best players. And when you see a game live, and you'll get to see that next season, which is amazing, the speed of the play, and you'll get to see some of the top players, which is incredible. And that's what we all love. But again, you're there watching the game. And it is hard for Bournemouth, isn't it? Because of your tiny ground. It's so difficult because, you have a lot of people who want to be there. But I do wish more kids would go and watch games and enjoy the games and actually become fans and become season ticket holders. Because actually, this is the thing. Football isn't about watching it from afar, switching on the remote. And it's about the match day. It's about the experience. It's about maybe going to the pub beforehand, speaking to your mates, then going up to the game. And it's that whole kind of adrenaline. And it's like Saturday, 3 p.m., which it should be really. But there we go. Yeah, that's changed a little bit because of telly. But that match day experience, and that's what it needs. And I know, like I say, my club has started to get back there again, thankfully. And I just hope other clubs are able to do that because that's what football's about. It's about being there and enjoying the day itself. And you and not knowing whether you're going to win, lose, or draw, but just enjoying the ride. And I think Bournemouth will this season because, again, that's the one thing is you've got nothing to lose. You know,
Yeah.
whatever you do, you'll enjoy it and you'll have those moments. But I suppose that the end game of the video I did is how can we save it from kind of closing in on itself? And it's probably beyond that now, but what do we do to enjoy the league as much as we can?
And you're spot on, Gareth. If we didn't have those dark days of -17, what sort of story would this be? You know,
Yeah.
it would be a case of Bournemouth's come from, mid-table in League One to the Premier League. Oh, they might turn up for a couple of seasons and go back down. Whereas, the glory of actually keeping our place in the Football League and then shooting through the leagues.
Yeah.
I don't think that will happen again. Say, for example, the Wimbledon story. I don't think that sort of story will happen again. Can you imagine somebody like, say, for example, Solihull Moors winning that playoff final, then being promoted through the leagues over a space of maybe a 10-year period, and then managing to keep themselves in the Premier League year on year on year on year, like Wimbledon did? I just can't imagine it.
No, and in fact, even us with Jimmy Hill, in the 60s, we were in the bottom league, and he brought us up within no time. You can't, again, because of money. Ironically, Jimmy Hill was the one who kind of championed, televised football and the wages and stuff like that, and making sure players got paid well. But that's right, he never saw it would go like this. I suppose that was just a gimmick to try and get football, to the masses, as it were. But yeah, you can't, and that's a shame. It's because then you think as League Two and conference sides, what are you fighting for? Well, just to do as well as you can each season, I suppose. And I suppose it's whether we say, do we look at football as game by game, and the fact that, and it is like that, I suppose. Don't get me wrong. So because our emotions can turn in 1 week, can't they?
Yeah,
we could be the worst football side in the world because you've lost to Boreham Wood, and then you win your next game, and you're like, here we go. So yeah, do we take each game like that and forget about the league and all the trophies we're fighting for or not fighting for? Maybe that's what the Premier League wants, is to just enjoy football for what it is. But for me, it shouldn't be that way. If you're going to have a league, it's a league that everyone is part of and is fighting to get up to the top of, and that's where NFL have it right, because they've got the draft system. I'm a big LA Rams fan from afar, because I have to be, because they're America. And why I ever picked that side, because I think I picked them in the 80s and 90s, and they've been terrible for so many years. But at the moment, they won the Super Bowl and they're up there. And I know in a few years' time they'll go back down. And you accept that, but it just never seems to be the way in our league, does it?
No, and one of the things that a lot of Championship sides have said, after coming down from the Premier League is, oh, how many years of parachute payments have we got left? And it seems that is, one of the core reasons of even going there. And it's a real shame. It's a real shame. And we need to somehow turn it around. Somehow Premier League needs to be a little bit more managed, because no team in the Championship can spend ridiculous amounts of money because of financial fair play now. There's a couple of teams that have fallen cropper of that. We got Sheffield Wednesday, we had Derby, we had Reading. There's probably going to be some next season as well that have been mentioned. So why do the Premier League not do that? Why can somebody like Man City spend ridiculous amounts of money? Because they've got ridiculous amounts of money coming in.
You've just mentioned as well, you just said some names there, and it's like the whole geography of the thing has just gone pear-shaped, hasn't it? I'd love the likes of Ipswich Town, Sheffield Wednesday, Forest are, thankfully, because they've been 20 odd years, haven't they, to get back up there again, because it just seems like the Premier League isn't getting that swell of a mix of different cities coming in and towns to play in it and to enjoy it, and it just seems to be the same teams. I mean, like you say, it's brilliant that Bournemouth made that push, and Luton almost did, and that would have been incredible to have a team like them back in it. And because that's the whole point of football, is everyone in the country needs to feel involved. And yes, we are in our own leagues, as I say. But it's funny you just mentioned Wednesday and play teams like that, because I think it is important to get them back up there again, and everyone kind of have their go. And you forget, when you look back at that picture from '92, so many of those teams were in it, including, as you pointed out, Oldham. And what you felt as well with the Premier League when it started was all of those teams had their own ethos. You just mentioned Wimbledon.
Yeah.
But I love that. I love the fact that each team had their own way of playing. It's like chess, Yeah, we might have Fash the Bash, and we're just going to lump it up. And Vinnie Jones, I mean, some of his challenges you certainly couldn't get away with nowadays. But I like the fact you had different styles of football, and you had your Man U playing the way they played, and Liverpool playing the way they played. And but you just sense a lot of it's now is, again, that's going the same way. Everyone's trying to play the same style and trying to adapt the same method. And it's like a game of FIFA rather than actually, every team having their own character, as it were.
I've got to be honest, I did watch the final day of the Premier League season, and it was mainly to see who was going to be going down, and we wouldn't be facing. Ended up being Burnley in the end. Deep down, I was hoping it was going to be Leeds, but
you get to play Leeds this season.
we can send them down ourselves. But of course, Liverpool were drawing against Wolves. Man City were getting beat 2-0 by Aston Villa. And then, of course, the inevitable happened. They changed it all, and Liverpool won their game, Man City won their game, and then won the title. And it just doesn't... I just don't see that as exciting, because I can see that happening.
Exactly. That you've just pointed out, the prediction beforehand you could have made. You knew exactly where that was going to go. And yes, people will say, but they were 2-0 down. That made it exciting. And you thought... The Aguero one, yes, because obviously that was the last minute. Man U had just won, hadn't they? I think 1-0 and whatever.
Yeah.
I could understand and obviously it was an incredible finish. But this one, you just sensed that, yes, Villa were 2-0 up, but you just sensed that Man City, when they wanted to flick that switch, and they did. And they needed the first goal. I get that. They needed the first goal. Otherwise, it would have been a real challenge for the last 5 minutes if they kept it too late. But once they got that goal, you could only see it going one way. And like you say, and it's the same with the FA Cup. You could only see that going one way in the end. When it got to the final, you knew who was going to be there. And you're right. I watched it like you, and just didn't really get any sense of thrill or excitement from it, which is a shame, because obviously from afar, our season was done. It was quite nice to be able to relax and just watch that. But yeah, because you knew which way it was going to go, it's kind of putting out everything more into perspective, which again is why I made the video that I did, because I think it's like the elephant in the room, because people, I mean, what do people high up in the Premier League do? Are they panicking? They can't do anything to upset the big clubs, because obviously that's where all the money comes. That's probably what it is. So you can never mention, the fact that actually we need to level this up now and actually start getting everyone back on a level footing again, because that will mean putting the big teams out. And of course, there's so much money being thrown at them. It's a very difficult one to know what to say.
I think the Leicester story back in 2015, 16 was remarkable, and that was what real football was. The side that had just built a team with next to nothing, with a manager that had never ever won the Premier League. Okay, yes, he'd managed Chelsea, but somebody who was classed as a little bit of a joke when he was at Chelsea, that he never actually got near it. And then them winning that, I think that was just a fairy tale. And that's the sort of stories that me as a football fan would love to hear more of.
And that's what I'm saying. Is that surely there's people in the upper echelons of the Premier League that thought that was the season that people will remember. They won't remember Man City beating Villa, to win the league against Liverpool, because frankly, who cared by then? It was going to be one or the other, exactly. Like the FA Cup final. And surely there must have been someone thinking, "Oh yeah, this works. This is a side who no one would have expected to be up there. getting up there and making it, and you know, obviously the whole Gary Lineker thing, and it worked a treat. And surely people are seeing that that's more exciting than the same teams churning out results, you know. And again, it's how that happens. Yeah, like you say, it was a fairy tale, and they just signed the right players at the right time, and it was all about momentum. That was massively about momentum. You did not want to play Leicester that season because it was like a juggernaut, just piling through everyone. They were beating team after team, and Bournemouth could do it. You know, they could get on a run, and suddenly no one wants to go to Dean Court. You know, it's a good stadium for that kind of thing as well, isn't it? Because it's tight and small, and I like that with Loftus Road as well. So, and I felt that with Luton away this season when we got trapped. Again, it comes to the character. We want the character of football to come back. It's gone, hasn't it? Because it's all about these big clubs, and it's, you know, I want the character of it to come back so we can enjoy it. You can fear going to these kind of smaller clubs, and I hope Bournemouth do well, because again, it's kind of sticking one up to the big clubs and saying, you know, hang on a minute, there are more teams in this league fighting for it, and then of course again, younger generations will like that and think, oh, this is good. You know, we're not seeing the same teams all the time on telly, and you know, and again, I just don't see the joy in superficial supporting. I just don't get it, because I'm a big club fan. I've always gone, you know, and you'd have been that first moment you're at your ground when you first see the grass and the magic of it, and that never goes. You know, once you've sensed it. And I just hope more parents take their kids to those smaller clubs and they enjoy that and then enjoy the ride, which will go up and down, but that's the whole point.
Yeah, most definitely. And, you know, hopefully, fingers crossed, you know, we can keep ourselves in there and things in football start to change. I think, you know, my big fear is if we do try and start changing things and taking away, say, for example, money from the top 6 or top 7, as it could be, with Newcastle in there as well, then that pushes them further towards this Super League idea, which is no good for the Man United, the Liverpool, the Chelsea fans. It's not what they signed into. It destroys their clubs. And, you know, so there needs to be something else that the Premier League does to actually make it more exciting, more competitive, and get it back to where it was 30 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I mean, they've got what they wanted in terms of the energy of the football that has come out and obviously the money of the football that's come in. But, yeah, it's not the competitive league that surely they want the league to be. And as you proved, and of course, it wasn't just Leicester, was it? It was yourselves the following season. They were there and thereabouts, you know, in the top 10. It can be done, but it's how we can do that on over a prolonged time, and not just as one-offs. And well, I suppose that's for them to try and get around the table and sort, because I think it has been pushed aside for way too long, and there's been this thrill of the football in the Premier League. Yeah, that's what it's all about. Aren't we excited that Liverpool and Man City are playing for the title? And actually, if people like us say no, we're not at all, we actually want to see something else, then maybe things will start to happen, but maybe they won't listen to us. We're irrelevant, I'm not sure.
Well, hopefully, fingers crossed, things start to change. Last question, Gareth, before I let you go. You know, of course, we're all very excited, but where do you think Bournemouth and Coventry will finish next season?
With Bournemouth, obviously, from a personal point of view, and I think it's always the way with us Championship fans. We want you to retain. We want you to make a play of it, and certainly with a club that's smaller like yourself, to say, you know, we do still exist. We're here, and we don't want to be a yo-yo club. So, again, there's a lot of luck, isn't there? But if you can get it right, and get, you know, sign the right players at the right price and not pay a ridiculous amount. And if you do pay a ridiculous amount, it pays off. There's no doubt you could finish, you know, near mid-table if you play it right. And that, from our point of view, that would be brilliant. What we don't want to see is a side getting hammered every week and just feeling like, you know, you're just playing for maybe the odd game where you get the odd win. And again, it comes from momentum. It comes from the confidence. If Scott Parker can get the confidence in the players from the start of the season. So hopefully, from your point of view, you know, something like 15th, 14th would be good, wouldn't it? Obviously, 17th is what
Yeah,
you'd be
yeah,
happy with.
definitely. I'll take 17th at the moment, but
yeah, absolutely. And if you do happen to come down again, it's making sure that you've got what it takes to then come back up again. I think from Cov, I'm so happy with last season. The only thing that we're gutted about as Cov fans is we do feel we should have finished higher. You know, we easily should have been top 10, probably top 8, because we just missed so many chances. And we made a lot of chances. That was the good thing. It's good that you're making chances and your football is creating those. That's the key thing. If you're not making chances, that's always a worry, and you're just a side that's going nowhere. But we were always, there's a lot of teams we played who said you should have won, and we ended up losing, you know. So if we can get that right and keep hold of our main players, that's the key thing, isn't it? I think we could be certainly top 10 and hopefully take it on from there. But you saw Barnsley, didn't you? You just you never know. We've got a manager though. I mean, they lost their manager, didn't they? And they lost it, you know, some players, and it was a really big blow for them. But as long as we keep Robbins and we can keep some of our main assets, then I think we'll do okay.
Well, fingers crossed that you can come join us in the Premier League, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we can actually stay there. That'd be nice, to be fair.
That would be good. And it'd be nice for us to play you in the Premier League, and we could scrap it out. That'd be good.
Yeah, exactly. We'll scrap it out for 16th, 17th spot, shall we, Gareth?
We'll enjoy that.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, it'd be more exciting than Man City versus Liverpool, though.
Yeah, and I'll get to write you a song again, so that would be good.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you again so much for coming on, Gareth. It's been a pleasure, as always, to talk to you. And all the details of Gareth's video about this subject is in the description as well, so please do have a watch of that as well. And thank you, everybody, for joining me on this show. Please do remember to hit the like, the subscribe, and the bell button below to be alerted to any new videos we do here on Up the Cherries in All Departments. We've got loads of great content coming up ahead of our first season back in the Premier League. Please do check out our recent video of Win List to 11th about Eddie Howe with John Sinclair, and all our previous interviews. Until the next video, I'll see you then.